Welcome to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society, whose mission is creating unity through music, or as I like to say, making connections through music with the intention of bringing peace. And today I am located at Studio One, the worldwide headquarters of the Planetary Gig Society, and connected by Zoom. Our guest, I'm really excited because I have followed her works, and you'll actually find them, and we'll talk about this on the Planetary Gig Society website. But thank you very much, Elena Mannes, for being here today to talk about music.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so I don't know if everybody out there knows, but Elena is an award-winning writer, film producer, author. A whole bunch of things. You're very eclectic and you really do a lot of creative things. And the way I found out about Elena is her book, The Power of Music. And I listened to the audiobook, I have to admit, and that was very good. And also she produced a movie. Was that called The Power of Music too? Or what was it?
Well, the book was actually called The Power of Music, but the movie was called The Music Instinct.
The Music Instinct.
Science and Song. But somebody had grabbed that title for a book, so when I wrote the book, they had to change the title to The Power of Music.
So it's a fabulous movie. Dan Levitin, Bobby McFerrin. A number of real luminaries in the field, and I just think it's a fabulous thing that you've done to put this out there into the world, these pieces talking about the power of music. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
So we hadn't met before, but as I say, we're just doing this, having this discussion right now, and I'm sure we'll get into the book and the movie and some other things, but. When did music come into your life? Did you have this interest because you had been a musician, or your parents were musical? There was music in your house. Are you a musician? Did you start playing music? How did music tap you on the shoulder?
Well, I'm not a musician. Certainly not a professional musician. I probably first came into my life in the womb, as my both parents were musical. My mother was a dancer with Martha Graham. My father and his family almost all of them were classical musicians. My great-grandfather conducted the Metropolitan Opera, and my great-uncle did the same, and another great-uncle founded the Institute of Musical Art, and my grandfather founded the Mannes College of Music in New York. My father was a pianist and ran the Mannes College for many years, as well as touring professionally. So, music is definitely in my genes, and I grew up with hearing it all the time, at home. So it's a part of me. I love music, but I didn't get the professional musician gene. I took piano lessons as a child and later took up the cello when I was an adult, which was a challenge. It's hard to learn a string as an adult, but...
I know. Tell me about it. I've been working on guitar for about almost 5 years now, and it definitely is a challenge. I will put.
Well, at least the guitar has frets. The cello just has no frets. So, but I love the instrument, so I certainly don't.
Did you play some as you were growing up, and do you play now? Were you ever in bands or groups or anything?
No, except for high school things of the recorder. I also played the recorder, but, I did recitals on the piano and stuff like that, but I certainly didn't play for fun, really. It was a lot of family pressure, actually, to do well in music, so it was a little daunting.
I can imagine. That's quite a history that you have in your family of music. So then how did you get the idea, or what steps led you to the path of deciding to, write a book and get a book published and do a movie about the power of music? Something must have triggered that.
Yeah, I did. I mean, I ran across a paper that my father, it was the first speech that my father had given to the Rockefeller Institute in the 1950s, about his theories of how music is built into us and how it relates to our bodies and brains. And I thought that was really interesting. And then I started to see articles in the New York Times and elsewhere about some of the new science, really, establishing that we are very connected to music and our bodies and brains. And I thought that would be a great subject for a television documentary. So I ended up raising the money with a big grant from the National Science Foundation, and then hooked up with WNET, the New York public television station, as a co-producer. And we did the documentary, and it aired in 2009. And then I had so much research that I couldn't get into the film that I ended up writing the book after that to explore the subject more deeply.
Oh, I see. And so, I mean, that's pretty amazing that your father, gave that speech and wrote about that. I mean, one of the things I've been learning about just in this podcast journey really is, it seems like we are sort of made of music or sound. We're vibrations. How was your father kind of spiritual or instinctual or about that? I mean, was that something, if you knew him, you would say, wow, he's really in tune?
Well, no, he was actually a scientist in a way as well as a musician. He wasn't particularly spiritual, but, at least not outwardly or consciously, maybe. But he was the co-inventor of Kodachrome color film, so wow. He definitely had a scientific bent as well. So I think the foundations of music in the scientific sense really fascinated him.
And so then when you did, you did this research and you came up with a documentary, I mean, how did that, what were the things that you learned? I know that people could watch the movie or read the book, but sort of the things that you really learned that made sense to you, that may have even affected the way you look at life from that research and the work that you've done about music and the power of music.
Well, I mean, I learned so much, it's hard to encapsulate it, but certainly learned about the new neuroscience showing, really music is processed in the brain. I mean, the brain is what translates sound waves and vibration into what we conceive as music. And there's been such a revolution in brain imaging in the last 20 years or so that is what really has allowed this new wave of research into music that we really can watch or actually see how the brain responds to music when we listen to it and when we play it. So that's led to all kinds of new research about how music is related to learning, how it can be used in medical purposes, et cetera, et cetera. So and there's a lot of that in the book, but I didn't know most of that when I started out. I just thought the subject area sounded intriguing, and I saw there was all this new science. So it was a revelation to me, as it hopefully will be to readers and watchers of the film.
Yeah, well, it certainly was a revelation. Growing up, music always seemed, it was something that we loved, and we went to dances and all that, but it seemed a little distant in a way, and we didn't have the benefit of that research, which, I mean, I totally agree from what I've seen and the books I've read. I wish more people knew about that research, and of course, one way is to read your book or watch the movie. But you also had some pretty impressive folks in the movie. Dan Levitin, who wrote "This Is Your Brain on Music," and he's quite a profound. How did you run into some of those characters? Did it all just naturally unfold as you went through it, or?
Yeah, I mean, I did obviously a lot of research, so I've discovered the key figures, and certainly the scientists who were working in this area, and Levitin is certainly one of them, a major one. So he ended up co-hosting. We used him as science co-host, so to speak, and Bobby McFerrin, who's really a musical genius for people who may not have experienced him, but look at his website. He's fantastic, and he was the music co-host, presenter, so to speak. So that's how we structured the film.
Yeah, and you said the name of the film was The Music Instinct. I guess that reflects the fact that the music is really instinctual to all of us, to everybody around the planet, I think.
Well, yes. I mean, it really, the new science is showing how, we're really wired for music in so many ways. I mean, we're wired to respond to certain harmonies, even in, infants. So there's a study by a German scientist that I found fascinating, showing that if you slow down and analyze the cries of infants, they actually contain very common intervals, harmonic intervals in music. Obviously, some of music, of course, is culturally acquired. Some of our response to music, I should say, is a matter of culture, not just wired. I mean, it's partly what's in us to begin with and partly what's acquired through cultural exposure. I mean, for example, I don't really like or respond to Chinese opera because I didn't grow up hearing it. I grew up hearing Western classical music. So, however, Western classical music is built on these foundational harmonies of music, which I think, it's my personal belief, and some would share it, certainly, that that may be why it's endured for so many centuries, because it relates so closely to what's already in us in terms of our response to music.
Yeah, I remember hearing that and finding it fascinating because we have a new granddaughter, and, you hear that, mommy, and you begin to realize how musical, or even when they cry and that sort of thing, that they're really about music. And certainly one of the first things they do, as you said, when music came to you first in the womb, as it does for all of us. I mean, there's the heartbeat, the kind of rhythm of life that we all are hearing as one of the main things that we can even perceive that young as well.
Yeah, and it's been discovered that the fetus does respond to music. It can hear. I mean, it used to be, wasn't always clear that was the case, but there's been research about that too.
Yeah, so it's really amazing. So I certainly hope that a lot of people have checked out that movie and read the book. I mean, as I said, we put it on the website because it is indicative of new research that's been going on. Have you had much in the way of follow-up to that? Has that been a continuing project? Or I know you have another book out now too, but has the music project been continuing, or?
Well, to some degree. Obviously, it's been some years since the film came out in 2009. The book was published in 2011, but the paperback's still available, still in print, which is great. And, I just was actually giving a book talk for my new book, and some woman came up to me and said she'd actually come because of the music book, because she's a music therapist. And she told me something I didn't know, that it's required reading in many states for people getting a certification in clinical music, which in effect is music therapy. So that's interesting.
Wow, that's fascinating, and that shows you how important that research and this that you had done is, because I've learned a lot more about music therapy recently and interviewed some music therapists, and it's pretty profound what they do, but it's not just strumming a guitar if somebody doesn't feel good. I mean, it's very clinical, research oriented, and so, I mean, that's quite an achievement. So kudos for having that book have such an impact on folks. And then you did have, I guess we should just mention the new book, which is, I just find it fascinating, and the name of the book is Soul Dog, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a book about spirituality of animals. And do you mind talking a little bit about that, and then maybe we could have a little more conversation about it?
Sure. Well, it's the spine of the narrative is built around my relationship with my first dog, a standard poodle named Brio, which I guess I don't have to explain that term to you and your audience.
Right.
Which course, in classical music means spirit and joy and gusto, and how initially, I was not very spiritual at all and very leery of anything kind of woo-woo and new agey. I was a journalist. I am a journalist, so I'm trained to be skeptical. But in the beginning, Brio was very disobedient, and I didn't think I was communicating with them. So to make a long story short, I got involved with the world of animal communicators and animal psychics, and came to believe, without a doubt, that animals communicate telepathically. There is interspecies communication, both before and after death.
Wow.
Which is that, talk about shifting my perspective of existence, that certainly has. I still am amazed that this happened because of my connection to my dog. But it was quite a journey, which I thought might be particularly interesting to people because I started out as such a skeptic. I certainly was not a believer to begin with. So that's what the book is about. And I included quite a lot of actually new science in that area too, about animal cognition and emotions and extrasensory abilities. It's quite fascinating. So there is some validation for this, what I think will be a new understanding of our connection to animals, our potential connection, and how we should view them not as our inferiors, but as different equals, and often our teachers, actually.
Wow, that is really profound, and I think you're exactly right that this is, something that for a long time we just assumed animals are, dumb old pieces of whatever, plasma. We don't treat them very well. We certainly don't treat, cows and chickens and pigs very well at all. I suppose I've been guilty of not really understanding that connection or spiritual aspect as well. But it does seem in recent years that there's just more of an understanding of that. So
yeah, it's growing. I think there's a real paradigm shift. We have a long way to go. It's a lot of animal abuse, but
yeah. Well, I'm definitely going to check out your book. I'm also going to get it for my son, who has a PhD in English, but really focuses a lot on animal stories and things like that. And I hope people will pick that up. Soul Dog. And what does strike me, I was going to ask if you think that there are some connections between this sort of the power of music and animal spirituality, because I've talked with folks about a lot of different connections through music. Certainly from the perspective of, it is fairly recent, the science that's telling us some things about both music and, our connection with animals and what animals are like. And anyway, do you have sort of any thoughts about that? It's kind of a big question. It might be a little bit of a weird question, but what do you think?
No, well, it's obviously they're both subjects that I'm interested, passionate about, and I guess I would say that they're both subjects, as I come to think about it, that they're about connection. They're about connection through music, or our connection to all beings and non-human animals. And you said your podcast here is about unity, bringing unity through music and connection. And I would say that what I've written about and non-human animals, our fellow creatures, is also about connection and unity. So I guess that's a thread that runs through both subjects.
Yeah. Another thing I mentioned before we started talking about Victor Wooten, who wrote the book The Music Lesson. He also does camps, music camps, which I attended 2 last year, and the camps are really focused around music and nature. And as many people have said, and as Victor said, he really sees them as the same thing, music and nature. And what you're talking about, we're not making a premise about it or anything, but it does seem to kind of fit in with that. If there's a connection with music and nature, if it's sort of similar thing, vibrations, we're all vibrations, all that. Certainly animals are beings very similar to us.
Yeah, we're all the same stuff when it comes down to it, I guess.
Yeah.
the universe is made of vibration also, so.
Yeah. Anything that you think of, if you were, ruler, or if you had, were someone who could wave a magic wand and have people do some things, what would you suggest that people do to, help make a better world through music, or even, with this new knowledge that you're passionate about animal spirituality? Do you have any suggestions for folks?
Well, in music, I would certainly, expose more people of all ages to live music. And, I think that's often where the connection really happens. Obviously you're connected through the earphones or whatever, you're still listening to music. But I really think live music, when you're listening with a group of people, is a special experience. And in terms of animals, I would urge people to do everything possible to change laws to protect animals from abuse. And I'm not a vegetarian, although I'm edging in that direction. But
yeah, I think it's important. I'm edging in that direction too. As a friend of mine said, cow is very tasty, but we don't. There's a lot of other things to eat, and we don't necessarily need it. Well, I don't know if you have any other thoughts you want to mention. I really appreciate your taking the time, and I think you've done a fabulous thing, really, for us all by putting the book and the movie out there, the film out there, because it's really so great and covers so many things that people I certainly wasn't aware of. So, thank you very much for that.
Well, thank you for having me and letting me talk about both books and the movie. And I'll just say, in terms of the new book, the dog book, Soul Dog, you can go to the website, www.souldogbook.com, and you can find links to buy it and see more about me and the stories. And I'd love to hear other people's stories about their soul dogs.
Yeah, very cool. And maybe at some point we'll have another conversation about, the connections or the similarities between music and animal spirituality. I'll look forward to that if it happens.
That'd be fun. So thanks so much.
Okay, Elena Mannes, everybody, thank you very much. You've been listening to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society. We talk with musicians and others about the power of music and how we can use music to help create a better world. Please check out our website, www.planetarygigs.org, for information about some of the organizations promoting music and musicians, resources about the power of music, books, movies, articles, including new research on music and the brain. We welcome your support. The Planetary Gig Society is a Section 501c3 charitable organization, and you can donate on the website. You also can receive a free email signature block demonstrating your support for Planetary Gig Society. Please follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Planetary Gigs. And we want to thank fabulous musician and teacher Eric Weinberg of Little Eric Studios for the Planetary Gig Talk music titled Chill Kid, It's Saul. So please check out Planetary Gig Talk on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Subscribe and hear all the upcoming episodes. Thanks very much.